Today we're going to create a wavy flag using a shape tween. So I'll create a new layer and I need to create a pole for my flag. So I'll name this layer pole, and then what I'll do is I'm using the line tool. I will also change my stroke over here and I'll give it a 4 for a stroke. And then I can just go ahead and pick a color for my pole. So I'll hold my shift key down, drag down, and I have a flagpole. I need a separate layer for the flag itself. So I'll click here, I'll double click on the layer 3 and I'm going to name it flag. Now I want to grab my rectangle tool, and life will be easier if I just say no strokes. I'll click over here on stroke, I'll choose the one with the slash through it, and then I will have a color for my flag. Now I'm on a totally separate layer, but here's what I do. I'll go ahead and lock all my layers, and I'll just unlock the flag layer right down here. And I'll make sure I'm on frame 1 of my flag layer. I'll click down and I will drag my flag. Now, even though it's a little over to the right, I can make any changes I want. So just click on the selection tool right here, the very first one, and I'll click on the flag itself to select it. Use your arrow keys on your keyboard, and you can move your flag wherever, however much you want to. So now what I want to do is I clicked onto the stage, and I need to bend it because when my flag starts waving, it isn't going to start straight like that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to move my mouse until I get like a little smiley. So I'm going to drag in just a tad, just a little bit like this to get it going. And then what I'll do is, here's a new tool, the Modify Envelope tool. So let's go to the Modify menu, Transform, Envelope. And you'll see if you try to do this that it's not highlighted, which means you can't select it. Because here's what I forgot to do. I'll click on the stage. I need to select my flag. So once my flag's selected, with the selection tool, Modify, Transform, Envelope. Now I get all these little dots around my flag, and I'm just going to move my mouse and I'm going to click on one of the little dots, and all I'm doing is morphing the flag a little bit just so that it gives it a wavy appearance. So I might just start out simply like that. I click on the stage, and if it looks a little too square for you and you think you need to bend it a little bit more this way, it's not a problem. So you can either do two things. You can either bend it in a little bit like this, or you could go back to the envelope tool, whatever you would like to do. Now, let's say that I want my animation to run for 2 seconds. That means that my entire animation will end up on frame 48. Why? Because I have said that I want 24 frames per second. So I want 24 of these. All of this will happen in 24 seconds. If I'm choosing 48 frames, that means this is the first 24 was the first second. The second 24 frames will be second number 2. So now my flag will start out like this, and just randomly, I mean you could do it wherever you wanted to, but randomly I'm just going to say at frame 24, which would be 1 second. So in 1 second's time, my flag will change from what it was like in frame 1 to what it's going to be like here soon. So I'll click into frame 24, and since this is a shape tween, that means every time you want a change in movement, you will insert a keyframe. So at this point, if I click outside of it, there is no keyframes here. So on the flag layer in frame 24, I will click on it, right click, and choose Insert Keyframe. Now, at this point you see my pole disappeared, and we'll fix that here in a minute. Right now, I just want a little difference in the shape of my flag so that the perception is it's waving differently, blowing differently in the wind. So I'm going to go up to the Modify menu, transform, envelope. And same thing, I'm just going to modify the shape of my flag. So maybe I'm going to drag it down a little bit. Maybe drag this side back up. This will come back down. And maybe this will come back up. Some of you guys are much more artistic than I'll ever be. So I don't want to change up too much because then I'm not so great at this. Okay, so then there's my flag and everybody's laughing at me. So you can see where all of a sudden it looks like this and all of a sudden it's morphing like this. Now I'm going to click back into frame 24. If you don't like right now you can see this little spot right here. So let's just go ahead and switch over to our selection tool. And you can change up some things, like we want to deselect it so you can see I don't have any dots around it, and I can move over here and I can just kind of drag down just to give it a little bit, you know, of a different look to it. Okay, so if I think it's too sharp or has some sharp edges, I can sort of, you know, fix it a little bit. Alright, now a shape tween, remember, has two keyframes. So I have a keyframe here, that dot, and that dot happens, you don't create one, you don't right click and create a keyframe, because the second you draw your flag shape, it produced one on its own. Now you did have to come over here to 24 and get yourself a new keyframe. Now we know every shape tween you have two keyframes, and then anywhere in the middle of these two dots, the two keyframes, I will right click and choose create shape tween. So now if I drag my playhead back to frame 1, you can just already see it's starting to move. Alright, now we said we wanted this to last 48 frames and be 2 seconds long. So I'm just going to click into frame 48, and if you'll notice there's nothing here. So what I have to do, remember, every shape tween, when you want a change in movement, you must have a keyframe. So I will right click, insert keyframe. So now on this keyframe, I need to go back and I need to change up the shape of this flag. So I'll go back to the Modify menu, Transform, Envelope, and once again I'm going to change up the look of my flag. And it's looking a little funky again, and so, you know, I can fix some of the edges and bring it down. I mean, you can do a lot of things. I mean, I'm not that artistic, and you know, if I wanted to change some things up, I can just go back. I can grab my envelope tool as soon as I select it, Modify, Transform, Envelope, and I can kind of fix some things. And you know, this just goes to show you, it is, you know, some of us will be much more artistic than others, and that's okay. We're all different, and I can just fix it a little. Okay, same thing. I have a keyframe here, the black dot. I have a keyframe here, another black dot. Remember, we need to have two, and then in the middle of the two, I will right click and create shape tween. Alright, so you can see how I've got this funny little thing because I messed around with it. So there's no problem. I can Control Z on my keyboard. I'm getting rid of my shape tween, and maybe I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this keyframe because that tells me that I'm starting from scratch again, okay, from where it was. So you can see where Control Z. So you can see where I started the time before. And so it's simple. Sometimes it's easier just to go back and undo some things, insert a new keyframe, and start from scratch. So I can start from scratch right here, and then maybe I can just change it up a little bit. Maybe I'll be dragging this down. Maybe I'll be dragging this up more. Give it a smoother edge. And then maybe call it good, and then I'll right click again in the middle, create shape tween. and then you can just kind of play it and see what happens. And you can see how I fixed it a little. So sometimes it's just easier to kind of undo some things if you're not artistic like me and if you're new at this. So then we're going to go back to frame 1. We'll play our flag. You can see it waving, and of course my pole disappeared. Why? Because my pole is only on frame 1. It is not on frame 2, 3, 4, anything else. So I want to see it through the whole waving, blowing in the wind of the flag. So all I'm going to do is I'll come over here to frame 48 because that's where I said I wanted my animation to end. I will right click, and this time it's insert frames, because don't you want frames all the way through? So insert frame. And now you see your flag wave. So I'll press the enter key on the keyboard, and there's my flag. I left my layer 1 empty. So the other thing that we had done the other day was to make some grass. So using our drawing tools, I can go ahead and I will give myself a color of the grass. If I chose to, I could have a stroke, but I'm just going to show you how to use the rectangle tool. So we'll click into frame 1 of the background layer, and then I need to unlock my layer 1, and then I'm just going to drag a rectangle, and then once I drag it, I'll press the selection tool, and then I can move it over. And it's okay if it hangs off the edge a little bit, no big deal. Now, once I've drawn my grass, maybe I want to give it a little bit more of a slope. So I'm just going to use my smiley face, and then I'll give it a slope. And then I have grass. And same thing, if I want to see my grass all the way through my animation, you can see how it's disappearing again when I press the enter key. And it's the same thing holds true. All I'm going to do, I need to insert some frames. So I'll go over here to frame 48, right click, insert frames. And then as I hit enter and play my animation, my flag and my pole along with the grass are all the way through frame 48.